basically, in some way, you could say that they have, pardon the expression, but brainwashed us into thinking that they are benevolent in the sense that they are going to take care of us. And that is probably
Uh,
the furthest thing from the truth. So last week, as you mentioned, we did the intro just about how we got together and all that. And then this week we had talked about it a little bit, and I think it seemed to make a lot of sense that we would talk about why somebody should be looking at IBC, to have it in their life, to have it in as part of their portfolio going forward. I think that that's the first thing you have to understand is why before you get into discovering how it all works and the way to think about it. And as we mentioned last week, Nelson's book, I think it's 98 pages. And the first half of the book is just about human behavior.
mm-hmm.
So anyway.
Yeah, you mentioned why being really important. Have you ever read Start With Why or listened to the book by Simon Sinek?
Yes, I've read that.
Fantastic.
I think I listened to it on Audible.
Yeah, me too. I didn't read it. I have so many. I've read quite a few, but I have a lot of titles on Audible because I happen to drive quite a bit. But that one, I've gone through a couple of times, and that one resonated with me a ton, because it's funny. I was raised in an environment where we were always challenged and questioned. Why are you doing what you're doing? Like, what is your purpose behind it? Are you thinking about what you're doing? And so when I came into my career and everything, I just assumed that's the way I thought, right? Because I was questioned that all my whole life. And it's funny because after reading that book, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm always starting with what? And I'm always starting with how. And I didn't realize that it's just so natural to start with what. And if you're not being really intentional all of the time, you're not going to start with why. That's just not natural behavior. So I think this is an appropriate topic to start out, our podcast episodes with. So you want to hop into some of the thoughts that you kind of garnered up?
Yeah. I first I'll just say, that, as we come into this world, I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and there were shows on TV, about the good guy, the bad guy, the hero, and and all that kind of thing. And I guess I kind of grew up with the idea. Oh, and then I went through the whole Woodstock era, and so it was all this love and peace and all this, and that's kind of how it colored my view of the world. I think the first time I felt like there was something wrong with the world was when I realized that people very close to me in age, just a couple of years older, were going off to war in Vietnam. And some of them came back. Some of them didn't come back. Some of them came back really messed up. And so I had that epiphany. Well, maybe everything isn't so perfect. But for most of my life, for a long, long, long time, I felt that way. And when I got into this business here, and Nelson was such a great mentor, and I never met the gentleman, but I never met Nelson, but he has certainly impacted me, and you as well, I'm sure. But I had been studying when I moved here to Iowa. I met a guy that was deep into Austrian economics, and he doesn't consider himself like a libertarian. He understands Austrian economics and considers himself a citizen of the world with good manners. That's how he kind of thinks about it. And I have spent the last 20 years, we're still very close friends, and he is constantly sharing information with me about, articles and books and all this. And so for many, many years, I've studied it. And I'll tell you, the rose-colored glasses came off in a hurry.
I bet they did.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that that's really the big reason that I think people should look at IBC. Once you understand the world system of fiat money that we are involved with. And fiat money doesn't matter whether you're talking about fiat money, the mark or the rubles, it's all fiat money around the globe. And so we have these depressions and recessions, and they call it the business cycle. Well, it's not actually supposed to function that way if you had sound money, like gold and silver was at one time. And with that idea that they will constantly have these cycles, you can just look at the last 70 years, that we're constantly going up and down, the Great Depression and all, 2008, and then even recently. They kind of like spin it saying the business cycle like it's normal, and it's not. So I just wanted to share some books that would open up people's minds as to historically what has really transpired around finance, that I'll just say the powers that be have wanted to control everything. So the first book I'll just mention is Wayne Jett's book, and I actually had the opportunity to interview him a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. But he has a book that he wrote, and get this is like a 600-page book, The Fruits of Graft. And he has a multitude of footnotes that you can go back and verify this information.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's all true. I mean, you can literally go right to the documents. You can find the books, and a lot of the books you can read free from the Mises Institute. So Mises.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
.org, right? MISES.org. Go there. You can find anything that he might reference. You can read the books, you can read papers, and then you can go out to the Washington Post, all these magazines, newspapers, New York Times, and find stuff from back, in the 1900s, late 1900s, and so on.
So, what did this book do for you? You mentioned taking the rose-colored glasses off, and I think that it's appropriate. You were talking about how Nelson was a great mentor, and he was a dead mentor for you, right? Not a living mentor that you could actually interact with.
Right.
Man, I wish I could have met that man in person as well. But as a mentor, one of the things that he said many times that has shaped the way that I have approached life was, when you know what's going on, you'll know what to do. And I think, if I could, that's kind of what you're saying with these books is, they expose you to what's going on. Therefore, taking the rose-colored glasses off that came off in a hurry. Specifically, The Fruits of Graft. How did that take rose-colored glasses off for you?
Well, because he went back, Teddy Roosevelt, he's going back 100+ years, and even more inside the book. But he marches you through step by step how methodical it has been to take over the financial world, setting up we call it the Federal Reserve, right? The Federal Reserve was already, before we settled in this country, there were Federal Reserves around the globe in certain countries, not all countries at the time, but there were certain countries that were already had Federal Reserves. And when we came here and they knew that the resources here were valuable, and they got their claws into this country and started the Federal Reserve back in the early 1900s. And from that point on, it they were able to control how money moved through the system. And he points that all out, how they did that. So they set up the Federal Reserve. First off, there's nothing federal about it, and there are no reserves. Now, one time there was reserves of gold, right? You could trade in the dollar note. You know, you see these, you can
Mm-hmm.
still find them in coin shops, silver certificates and things of that nature. So for me, it was that he methodically laid it out from the very beginning, of how and why they have marched down this road to take more control of us. And basically, in some way, you could say that they have, pardon the expression, but brainwashed us into thinking that they are benevolent in the sense that they are going to take care of us. And that is probably
uh,
the furthest thing from the truth.
it makes me laugh. It's so far from the truth. It makes me laugh. Oh my gosh, it's sad.
Yeah. So this is, and I hold this, but this isn't the only book, right? There are a number of books. Well, this is interesting too. Ron Paul's End the Fed, and there's reasons why you might want to end the Fed. But there's another book if you want to just read about the creation, just the creation of the Federal Reserve. You can get this book at Amazon, and we'll put these in the show notes, the links to these books, so that you can get them quickly. And this is just a sample, a very small sample of books that you can get. There's another gentleman by the name of Barry Dyke that is a great author, probably at least as good a researcher, if not better than these other guys. But I mean, they're all just fantastic. But this is a book you can get, The Pirates of Manhattan. And I think it's Barry Dyke that says, you know, you can, if you want to play the casino, you can either go to Las Vegas or you can go to Wall Street, you know, one or the other.
That is funny
And this
and so
is his
accurate.
number 2. And I know that he's coming out with number 3, and then he also has another book, a 4th book. But his research is impeccable. It's more modern day, like it is historical, but it's not as deep as The Fruits of Graft, or The Creature from Jekyll Island is another
Right.
great book to read.
He explains how we're constantly being burglarized, right, or plundered. I think is how he
Yes.
coins it, right?
Yeah.
By the powers that be. You know, they set us up like we're um, the recipient of a benevolent offer, aka a loan, and then find out that loan is meant to absolutely bury us.
Mm-hmm.
Why are they doing that? You know, and how are they getting away with it? Legal plunder, you name it. You know, it's so many different things.
Right.
I will say, you know, you brought up several different books, and I haven't read all of those books. So I thank you for bringing those up. One I have read is Pirates of Manhattan, and I agree with you. Barry Dyke is just an amazing researcher. I gained a ton of information from that book. I will say those books are not meant for anyone who are looking for a leisure read on just a little bit of an understanding, because he uses words, man, that not everybody understands. You know,
Mm.
they're accurate words, extremely accurate words, but they're not um it's not a simple easy read. I guess you have to kind of go into it knowing this is something you got to focus on. You got to take your time, and you're gonna have to chew it like half a page or a page at a time. You're gonna have to chew on this stuff and let it soak in, because it's like, for me, what it did was like, holy cow, I'm
Yeah.
realizing that there are people out there truly that don't give a rip about my success. They are willing to use me to get ahead, and there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
And I didn't used to believe that about people. but you put,
Yeah.
people behind corporations, and they're there acting on behalf of the corporation. The corporation says to do this, they're going to do it. It's their job, right? They don't necessarily want to hate on or hurt you and me individually,
Right.
but they're not going to stop the corporation from doing it necessarily. And what are the different ways that they do that? Oh man, it was so enlightening.
Right. Yeah.
Awesome book.
And
Complicated, but very awesome.
I guess I want to say, we're talking about the why to IBC, and a big piece of it is to create freedom for yourself. So your point about, that these people that have a job, and they're being told what to do, many times we don't have a choice because we are also indebted ourselves,
Hmm.
And in this day and age, the kids coming out of college, I mean, most kids have way too much debt uh, as soon as they start, so right out of the gate. But yeah, so you're right. They have no interest in our interest. They
Yeah.
they can only think that they wish to make a servitude to them.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're sitting down with a client, what do you most frequently hear when you ask your client why? Why are you interested in infinite banking? What is it that they're interested in?
Well, I think for me, it's been that people, generally speaking, by the time they get to me, they've already read something or watched a video, and many times they're very, very curious. And so then I'll possibly share more information with them about IBC or about what's going on in the world, and how things are really working and why they do want to seriously look at it. But I try to keep it as simple as possible when it comes to why IBC, in that it's a it's a mechanism, in my opinion. It's a mechanism to save money consistently in a very, very safe place if you are with the right insurance company. And consequently, if you were, then you'd probably find yourself with the right agent. Because not all life insurance companies are equal. So what makes what we do unique is that, first off, we don't deal with any stock insurance companies. And that's a whole other subject as to why. But generally speaking, we are working with mutual insurance companies that have paid a dividend and been around for over 100 years or more. And so they are coming to me for answers to understand what is it that we're really doing. And the simplicity of it is that you're putting money in a place that's very, very safe, where you, over time, over a very short period of time, take control of a pool of money that, as you pay into, will consistently grow. And it gets to a point where it's unbelievable how much it grows, even with the percentage of dividend and interest that you accumulate. But they come to me wanting to know more, and I actually try to ask them to avoid the noise in the world out on the social media. There is all kinds of information that can mislead you, and if in your own gut, this that I'm sharing with you, like I'm saying this to the party I'm speaking to, if this resonates with you, then continue learning. And because you and I are still learning, we're continuing to grow and learn uh, about the financial world and how it's IBC's place in that.
Yeah.
So that's really what they're coming after, I think, is they're wanting to know more, and they're wanting to know, is this really real?
Yeah. They
And
want to
why
know
haven't
what
I heard
infinite
about
banking is.
this?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And I think that's all. I would say totally accurate as far as when people are coming to me, it's the same things. What is infinite banking? It's a huge question. And why should I do it? Ultimately, what I have found with my clients is they want freedom. That is why they're even interested in infinite banking, is they want freedom, not just over finances. That's what it appears to be, um, from the outside, or originally. They think they want freedom with their finances. They want freedom to, go do what they want with their finances. But it's more than just wanting freedom with their finances. They want the freedom to be able to choose when they do something, how they do something, and where. They don't want any restrictions, right? Because they understand that they've got a vision. Almost every one of my clients has a vision for what they want in the future. And they don't see a path within the current financial environment of that being totally feasible if they're outside of the normal, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so kind of how it shakes down for folks is some of the fundamentals that I always talk about, with folks. I call them the four fundamentals of infinite banking, or the four pillars. You get guaranteed growth with infinite banking. Is it the best growth out there? No. No, it's not. You can always do better with a stock, or with a different investment. There's always things that will outperform infinite banking. It's not here to be an investment. And so I hate it when people classify it as an investment. It's totally misunderstood. If you're classifying infinite banking as an investment, you're not thinking about it correctly. But they're
Right.
looking for guarantees within their finances, and that's not something that's very common, right? And just that little thing, the guarantees, that provides freedom, kind of a peace of mind and everything. And then some of the other ways is just access. You have access to liquid capital that you have full control over, and it's
Right.
protected against malintent, or malwishers, whatever you want to call them. People can't
Mm-hmm.
get access to this stuff. It's yours and yours alone, which is amazing. And then the tax-free elements, which I don't want to dive in too much on here because I'm not a tax advisor, but the ability for your capital within an IBC policy designed correctly to grow without experiencing any tax implications is amazing. I mean, that's very few things
Yeah.
are out there, and the things that are out there, I mean, you start to wonder when you're like, "Hey, I want a tax-free growth on my money." They're like, "Okay, put it in a Roth IRA." It's like, "Okay, how much can I do?" $6,500 a year. Why don't you retire on $6,500 a year? You set that aside from now until your retirement. You think that's going to get you ahead? No way. That's not going to outpace inflation. No matter how great the growth is, legitimately, that's not going to work. Why are they capping this tax-free growth stuff? Well, it's because they don't want it. I should say, because it's so good, they have to put a cap on it, or else everyone's going to put all their money in there. A Roth
Right.
IRA is fantastic
Right.
until you can't put more money in it, you know?
Yep.
So
Yeah. And
people
it,
are looking
and if
for freedom from that system. That's what they're looking for.
right. Yeah. Like I don't. Maybe you remember which book it was that Nelson wrote. That it says. I think the subtitle is something to the effect of what you just said, was the seceding from the current financial system. I can't remember whether it was the Warehouse of Wealth or
Oh, I don't know. I don't
uh,
remember all the subtitles.
yeah, yeah. There's Nelson's book right there behind you.
Yeah,
Uh,
the Building a Warehouse of Wealth is a grassroots method of avoiding the fractional reserve banking.
yeah, yep,
Yeah.
um, yeah. The the people that come and talk about return on investment are not thinking correctly about why you want a pool of capital that you have complete control over. You know, you can think about return on investment on anything you like but this. You want to go buy a stock, you want to look at your 401k and all those kinds of things. This is the only place that I'm aware of that this is not meant to be just looked at as an investment. It's actually a tool to utilize that capital that you've built up to make other investments. You know, you have what's the phrase? Everybody's heard the phrase. In order to make money, you got to have money, right? More money makes more money. Everybody's heard that. So if you have access to capital, you can make investments that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise. If opportunities come along and you say, oh my God, I wish I had 10,000, 5,000 to turn that over and make a profit. If you don't have as little as $5,000 or $10,000, you can't take advantage of that. It'll go right on by you. So it's the return on investment on the investment that, because you had that pool of capital that you made.
Yep.
That's the way to think about it. It's not. Yeah, and you're absolutely. Excuse me. Let me just.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry about that.
Before I forget this thought, the whole thing about the Roth, you're pointing out that they don't want to put a cap on. They do put a cap on that because they don't want you putting all your money into it, because they need your money to go into the market.
Mm-hmm.
Because without your money going into the market, there is no market.
Right. And that was, oh man, I don't want to get into all of the mech laws and everything. But one thing I do want to say that is really just interesting and hilarious to me is people talk about 401ks being great, right? Well, then that's pre-tax dollars. If you want it to grow post-tax, so you're not taxed on the outcome, what are your options? Everyone goes to a Roth IRA, right? That's your automatic default. Anytime the government puts a limit on anything, it should cause you to ask the question, why? Okay.
Precisely.
Now, if a Roth IRA, if the cap is $6,500 per year, that's pretty tiny. That's pretty tiny. In our rate of inflation and everything, that's pretty tiny.
Yeah.
Now, that would indicate that the Roth IRA, if you know what you're doing, you can make a decent amount of money in there. Fantastic, right? Well, let's compare that to the Roth 401k. What's the limit on that? $22,500. Which one's more efficient? If they've got a cap on an IRA that's $6,000 and a cap on a 401k that's $22,000, why? Is it a question of efficiency? Is it a question of which one does the government have a little bit of access to? I mean, so many different questions. I'm not saying why or what is the actual reason that they have the limitations. I'm just saying it causes me to ask the question. Until you start questioning all of these things that you run into on a daily basis that have become so invisible because they're so prevalent, until you start asking why they're happening, you're just going to continue falling in the same rut, falling in the same trap, and you're going to be right there with every other American.
Yep.
I love what you said. You asked about how to secede from the current monetary regime, and that was Nelson's book. You can see it here, Case for IBC, and that's what it says. How the subtitle is How to Secede from Our Current Monetary Regime, One Household at a Time. Why should you look into infinite banking? Because it's something that you can do practically to change not only your life, but also the households that come after your life, your kids, your grandkids, your great-grandkids, and everything, all of the generations that follow. If you apply infinite banking to your life, you're doing something that's multi-generational, not just for you, not something that just ends with you. So you're taking freedom, applying it to you, and then giving it as a gift to all of your offspring. What better gift could you give anyone?
Yeah, when you think about wealth, what does wealth mean? Well, it means a lot of different things. There's all kinds of wealth. But in terms of finance and wealth and money as an exchange vehicle, the idea around creating wealth for finance for generations to come is asking you to think long term.
Mm,
And in our world, I always use the example of McDonald's.
yeah.
I was probably 15, maybe even a little younger, when the first McDonald's came to southern New Hampshire, which is where I grew up. And it was for $1, a burger, fries, and a drink, and a nickel back. And it was fast, right? And everything from that point on has gotten faster and faster and faster. Everybody has this mentality of instant, whatever it is I want. And this is a vehicle for long term, what you just said, generational. So 100, 200 years from now, which is many times difficult to get our heads wrapped around that. Yes, our grandparents, and if you saw your grandparents, knew your grandparents, they actually lived a life. So if you can use that to project yourself forward into the future where you have your own kids and your own grandkids and great grandkids, time does move on. And people that have been practicing this for decades, I'll say, have created, well, Nelson is a great example.
Yeah.
That he was teaching his great grandkids, I think. I don't know if it was great grandkids, but certainly his grandkids and definitely his own kids. So anyway, yeah. So what else would you like to mention about all this?
Oh man, I feel like I could talk about this for so long, but at the same time, I know when I'm going through podcasts, I'm like, what's a 30-minute one? What's a 35, 40-minute one that I will know I'll be able to get through on this drive. And so in the interest of our listeners, I'm satisfied. I've said what some of the main points. Freedom is a big deal. Freedom to choose, freedom to access, right?
Yes.
You're
Yeah.
protected, and then also, it's practical. It's so stinking practical. One household at a time. You don't have to worry about your whole town doing this. You don't have to worry about your whole family doing it. Just you. Just start with you. Learn a little bit, and go from there.
Yeah.
And I think that those are some of the basic reasons why. And then if you're looking for more of the information behind what's caused our current environment and why you should look into infinite banking, those books that you brought out are great resources.
Yeah. It's a good place to start.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
the
becoming
other,
your own banker, that's the best place to start right there.
yeah, that is actually a very good place to start. Um, the last thing I want to mention is, so we came to this earth to, in my opinion, to love and care for one another, take care of one another, raise our families, raise our communities, and all of that kind of thing. But we didn't come here to be slaves, to be in servitude to someone else. If you look at the Bible, you look at the Quran, you look at Buddhism, you look at any type of spiritual teachings, they all talk about that our Creator created us to be free.
Mm.
We are meant to be free. And just the fact that you have a job and you can't leave because you need that cash flow, let's talk about how to create other kinds of cash flows that are guaranteed, in the sense that you grow this in a guaranteed vehicle. And if you want to take an advantage of an opportunity and you have the capital to do it, you can grow your freedom.
Thank you for joining us on the Sound Banking Podcast. If you're listening on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe and click on the notification bell. Otherwise, join us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify for more content.